If you think billionaires like Bill Gates or Elon Musk are rich, wait until you hear about Mansa Musa, an African emperor whose wealth makes today's billionaires look modest. But beneath the gold and grandeur lies a darker truth. Before he was celebrated as the Golden King of Africa, Mansa Musa built his empire on the backs of slaves and ruthless conquests, until one tragic mistake transformed him from a feared tyrant to a generous ruler. This is the story of Mansa Musa. Our story begins in 1280, when Mansa was born into the royal family ruling the Mali Empire. He was destined to become one of the richest individuals in history. However, his ascent to the throne wouldn't happen for a while. Until the age of 32, he remained in the shadow of his older brother Mansa Abu Bakr. However, that changed when his older brother suddenly left the throne to become an explorer. He launched a bold expedition to explore the Atlantic Ocean. In 1312, he set sail into the unknown, commanding a fleet of 2,000 ships filled with men, women, and slaves. And here's the thing, he never returned. With Abu Bakr's mysterious disappearance, the mantle of leadership passed on to Mansa Musa. With his brother finally gone, Mansa seized the opportunity to carve his own legacy, one that would be defined by ambition, expansion, and unprecedented wealth. Mansa wasted no time in shaping the empire's future. He began an aggressive military campaign, expanding the empire's reach through conquest and strategic alliances. He annexed 24 cities, including the legendary city of Timbuktu. This was one of the main centers of trade between West Africa and the Islamic world. Controlling it solidified Mali as the dominant power in the region. In a span of a few short years, Mansa's empire grew to stretch over 2,000 miles from the Atlantic coast to the borders of modern-day Niger. By area, this was a land nearly twice the size of Texas. Mansa's empire was one of the largest in the world. It was so big that many said that it would take a full year to travel from one end of his empire to the other. In fact, the 14th century traveler Ibn Battuta confirmed the vastness of Mansa's empire. He noted that it took 4 months of travel from the northernmost borders to the southern capital of Niani. Now look, Mansa's domain was impressive, but there were other great leaders who also looked after vast, expansive territories as well. But Mansa was different. What set him apart was his indescribable wealth that he came to accumulate, something that the other rulers wouldn't even come close to. And to truly understand Mansa's wealth, we must explore the unique system that allowed him to get this wealth, to amass vast control over resources and people and precious material. In fact, the unique structure of African empires played a significant role in this. You see, unlike the feudal systems of Eurasia, where wealth was often tied to land ownership and labor of serfs, the Western and Central African elites secured their wealth and status through the control of kinship groups. For context, a kinship group in African societies was a network of related individuals whose labor and resources were controlled by their leader. People in this group came through marriages or even through social bonds and connections. To oversimplify the idea, think of it this way. In feudalism, formal roles and hierarchies provided some checks and balances to the people who were in power, people who were at the top, whereas in kinship groups, the leader's control over resources and labor could result in much less oversight and greater potential for abuse. So in kinship group, it really all depended on that one leader. Any value that a kinship group would produce, whether it was through labor or control over resources, belonged directly to the head of the household or the leader. Also back then, it wasn't uncommon for captives to be enslaved by the victors of war. These individuals were seen as outsiders, but they soon became instruments of power for their captors. And the vicious kings would use slaves for labor, to expand their kinship networks, and to spread spiritual beliefs, and to trade for further economic gain. Now, Mansa Musa waged extensive wars of expansion, and that's why he was able to amass significant human resources this way. All of this fueled the economic engine of the empire. As you can see, Mansa not only owned vast lands rich in resources, but also commanded a vast workforce whose labor he directly profited from, without the burden of paying salaries. He had unparalleled control over vast resources with a huge workforce who didn't need to be paid. To top it all off, Mali was a very rich country. It was rich in gold, and Mansa Musa controlled the production and distribution of this precious metal, using his status and his vast workforce of slaves. In fact, during the later medieval period, West Africa was responsible for producing nearly 2/3 of the world's gold supply. I mean, there's likely a chance that a lot of jewelry, coins, or even circuitry in your phone has gold that originally came from the Mali Empire. But gold was not the empire's only source of wealth. Mali also dominated the salt trade, and salt was a commodity that was as valuable as gold in those times. You see, salt is essential for not only flavoring food, but for hydration, especially in the hot climates of Africa, the Middle East, and India. This was a crucial resource. Before modern industrialization, obtaining salt was a very labor-intensive and often dangerous work. Salt either had to be mined by hand or produced through the laborious processes of evaporating seawater. Mansa Musa had control over a vast number of slaves to throw into this grueling work. It allowed his empire to mine large quantities of salt with relative ease. This kind of forced labor became a cornerstone of Mali's economy. It allowed Mansa to maintain and vastly expand his wealth and influence across the region. Timbuktu was strategically located between the gold fields and the salt mines, becoming a major trading hub and a center for immense wealth, further enriching Mansa Musa's empire. Elephant ivory was another significant source of wealth for Mansa Musa's empire. Much like gold, ivory was sought after for its rarity and aesthetic appeal. Its versatility made it a prized material for craftsmen and could be worked into a variety of intricate and valuable objects. Ivory was especially in high demand in Europe. There, it was used to create sacred objects for Christian worship. For such purposes, the tusks of African elephants were the most prized due to their size and quality. This demand from Europe provided Mansa Musa yet another lucrative trade opportunity, further enhancing his empire's fortune. Now, over the years, through trade and conquest, Mansa Musa had grown immensely powerful, and he felt invincible. He ruled with an iron fist. However, a tragic incident was about to happen that would make him completely change himself, making him more humble and pious. It is said that Mansa Musa accidentally killed his mother, and this grave mistake filled him with immense remorse and regret. In this anguish, he sought the guidance of religious leaders and scholars. He asked them what deeds and actions he could possibly do to bring himself forgiveness from his God. The religious scholars advised him to undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca. There, he could seek penance for his actions and ask for forgiveness. Now, it's important to note that the idea that Mansa killed his mother, well, that fact is widely contested, and some people even say that there's no historical record or proof that this happened. Either way, his pilgrimage to Mecca did happen, and that's what changed him. Whether the idea of the pilgrimage was initiated by his mother or not is a debated topic, but either way, it's the pilgrimage to Mecca that was a defining moment in his life. The journey was to serve a spiritual awakening for Mansa Musa, reshaping his life and reign from that point forward. So now it's 1324, and the 44-year-old Mansa Musa finally embarks on his famous pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, this journey not only demonstrated his deep commitment towards forgiveness and being a pious man, but weirdly enough, it also awakened the world to the staggering wealth of Mali. You see, his pilgrimage was to become a spectacle of opulence that would leave a lasting impression on every region that he passed through to get to Mecca. You see, starting from his capital in Niani on the upper Niger River, Mansa Musa's journey took him through Walata in the modern-day Mauritania, and onto Tuwa in Algeria before finally reaching Cairo. And on his way, he would build a mosque in every village they would pass on a Friday. Accompanying him was an impressive caravan consisting of 60,000 people. This included a personal retinue of 12,000 enslaved persons, all dressed in the finest brocade and Persian silk. The emperor himself rode on horseback, with 500 enslaved persons preceding him, each carrying a gold-adorned staff. To transport his riches, Mansa Musa had a baggage train of 80 camels, each loaded with 300 pounds of gold. As Mansa Musa and his entourage made their way through the streets of the Egyptian capital, people stopped what they were doing. They were staring in amazement at the incredibly spectacular leader of this unknown land. Even the Egyptian official responsible for greeting incoming caravans was astounded, and he is reported to have said, "This caravan competes in the glittery glory with the African sun itself." In Cairo, Mansa Musa would spend lavishly on charity. His spending flooded Cairo's market with so much gold that actually it caused a significant decline in the value of the state currency. The impact was so intense that the market had not fully recovered even after 12 years. Now, not all of this wealth went to charity or pious causes. It's very important to note this, because according to a historian from Cairo, Mansa Musa brought with him 14,000 slave girls for his personal service. His entourage also spent lavishly, purchasing Turkish and Ethiopian slave girls, singers, and fine garments. I mean, I don't know about you, but all of this while going on a pilgrimage, it just gives you a peek at Mansa's true character. Anyway, after a 3-month stay in Cairo, Mansa Musa and his caravan set out for the final leg of their journey to Mecca. This path ahead was grueling, with 1,000 miles of harsh desert standing between them and their destination. The vastness of the desert tested the endurance of every traveler, but they still pressed on. Even for someone like Mansa Musa with all the gold in the world, the journey was still incredibly difficult. As they crossed the desert, they finally reached the northern part of the Red Sea, arriving at the Gulf of Al-Aqaba. This was a crucial juncture where routes from Africa converged with those in Europe and Asia. It created a melting pot of cultures, languages, and peoples, all united by their pilgrimage of Mecca. Now, for Mansa Musa, this was a profound moment, witnessing firsthand the vastness and the diversity of the Islamic world. First arriving in Medina, Mansa Musa is reported to have visited Prophet Muhammad's mosque and tomb, where he is reported to have prayed and seek forgiveness. He also paid his respects at the tombs of the Prophet's companions. Now, during this stay in Medina, Mansa Musa met with scholars from all over the Islamic world. He was very impressed by their knowledge, and that's why he invited some of them to return with him to Mali, where they could teach Arabic, Islamic religion, and culture. After this, his caravan then left Medina, following the same route that Prophet Muhammad had once taken. Upon reaching Mecca, Mansa Musa completed the rituals of the pilgrimage, finally become a Haji, a revered title given to those who completed the pilgrimage. While in Mecca, Mansa Musa demonstrated his generosity and devotion. He purchased houses to accommodate future pilgrims from Mali. He also distributed 20,000 gold coins as alms to the poor. A year after his journey began, Mansa Musa finally returned home to Niani in 1325. Many historical accounts claim that he was no longer the same man who had set out. The journey had supposedly transformed him, humbling him and deepening his faith. But to the world, his journey simply showcased the splendor and the wealth of Mali, an empire of inexhaustible riches. Now, if we accept some of these claims, then we can say that following his transformative pilgrimage to Mecca, Mansa Musa returned to Mali not just as a wealthy ruler, but as a man intent on improving his empire. His experiences on the journey had humbled him and inspired him with a desire to leave a lasting legacy beyond mere riches. I mean, there is evidence that shows that he tried to better his society, investing a lot in education, infrastructure, and the spread of the Islamic faith. His efforts were not just about personal glory. They were aimed at giving more back to his subjects and securing a long-term prosperity for his empire. Mansa Musa transformed his empire into a sophisticated center of learning within the Islamic world. He initiated a revitalization of the cities under his rule. In places like Gao and Timbuktu, he built mosques and public gathering places with buildings, laying the foundations for a flourishing culture and educational renaissance. Timbuktu in particular became renowned as a major Islamic university center during the 14th century, attracting scholars from all across the Islamic world. At its peak, the city could accommodate more than 25,000 students, and its libraries housed over 800,000 manuscripts. This made it one of the most significant centers of learning at its time. As part of achieving this grand vision for an empire, Mansa Musa brought in architects and scholars from distant lands. One of the most notable figures was Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a Granada poet and architect who had traveled with Mansa from Mecca. Al-Sahili was commissioned to build mosques. This included one in Gao, which was constructed using burnt bricks, which was a very innovative material in West Africa at that time. Mansa Musa ruled over his empire for nearly 25 years. During this time, both he and his empire had gone a dramatic transformation. He left an indelible mark on Mali, turning it into a flourishing empire with major cities that served as vital trade links between Africa and the wider world. After his death, Mali continued to enjoy the prosperity that Musa had cultivated. Timbuktu continued being a beacon of learning and commerce. However, as we have seen time and time again, again, when there is a rise, there is also a fall. The wealth that Mansa Musa had amassed and the empire that he built would not last indefinitely. Over time, the power of the Mali Empire began to wane. New trade routes were being established by emerging empires, gradually bypassing Mali's overland networks. These new routes, coupled with the rise of the Atlantic trade, weakened Mansa's legacy on the region. The most damaging of these developments was the arrival of European ships in the 1460s. It marked the beginning of a significant shift in Western African trade. You see, initially, the Portuguese traded goods like clothes, ivory, and copper with local populations. But now, as European demand for enslaved people grew, the nature of trade drastically changed. The Atlantic slave trade, along with the continued demand for African gold and other resources, redirected the region's economic focus from interior trade routes controlled by the Mali Empire to coastal trade routes controlled by European powers. This shift further eroded Mali's economic power and influence. As the Mali Empire's power weakened, regions it had once conquered began to revolt and break away. The empire suffered its greatest setback when in the 1460s, the city of Gao became the center of a revolt. It had been one of the city's most crucial and influential cities alongside Niani and Timbuktu. Gao had a rich history as the capital of an independent kingdom before it was absorbed into the Mali Empire, and the seeds of rebellion had been long simmering. The revolt was led by Soni Ali, a distant descendant of Gao's original royal lineage. Sensing the weakening grip of the Mali Empire, Soni Ali seized the opportunity to restore Gao's independence. His military prowess was undeniable, and he successfully established a new independent kingdom centered around Gao. It became known as the Songhai Empire. Now, Soni's ambitions didn't stop at independence. He wanted to challenge his former overlords. Recognizing the vulnerability of the Mali Empire, he, along with his successor Askia Mohammed I, embarked on a campaign to conquer much of Mali's territory. The Songhai Empire rapidly expanded, nearly matching the size and influence of the Mali Empire at its peak. By the middle of the 17th century, the once great Mali Empire was a shadow of its former self. It had been decimated by the internal strife and external attacks. Mansa Musa's wealth had been great, but it was built on a shaky foundation. The control of overland trade routes, which was not meant to last as other trade routes and strategies were developed by competing powers, was the downfall. But what about Mansa's children, his descendants? Well, despite the loss of wealth and also royal power, Mansa's descendants strangely continue to enjoy influence to this present day. Although the influence and power of Mali diminished, the cultural and historical impact remained significant. The influence of Mansa Musa's lineage is evident in modern-day Mali, where figures like Salif Keita, one of Africa's most influential musicians, or Modibo Keita, the first president of Mali, trace their lineage back to the great empire. Even in recent history, Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, who led Mali from 2013 until his recent removal in a 2020 coup, was part of his enduring legacy. You see, Mansa Musa's rise also marked the transformation of the Mali Empire into a global powerhouse. Mansa managed to forge an empire that would be known for its wealth, cultural influence, and intellectual achievements. More than immense wealth, it was how that wealth was used that defines his legacy. If he had simply amassed riches and kept them to himself, history would have forgotten him, just as another wealthy ruler. It was through his extraordinary acts of generosity and service and commitment to public works that he forever etched his name into the annals of history. Now, let's take that with a grain of salt, because it's true that Mansa Musa's legacy as a patron of culture and a symbol of immense wealth remains influential. However, it is also crucial to recognize that his prosperity was built on the exploitation and suffering of enslaved people. While his generosity and contributions to education and infrastructure was significant, they were also made possible by a system of brutality and forced labor that simply cannot be overlooked. Now, if you watched this till now, please leave a thumbs up emoji so I know how many of you stayed till the end. And also, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would really mean the world to me. And lastly, if you liked this video, check out this video that I made about the Rothschilds. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.